Hi, guys. Welcome to the second ever episode of the Odyssey podcast. We have another special episode for you all here today. We have with us Joanna Rostant, the queen of Chuck E. Cheese's in Trinidad. All kicks aside, she's the franchise owner of Chuck E. Cheese's in Trinidad and Tobago. And she also has had a previous very successful career in oil and gas. So we're going to jump into her journey a little bit, see what caused her to change from the corporate world to the business lifestyle, and just see what the story is about. And, we're going to have an interesting story here today. So where we like to start, Joanna, is in secondary school, because I believe that is kind of the first period in your life where you're making big decisions for yourself, what you want to do and whatever. So the decisions you make could kind of drastically change the outcome of your life. And the friends you make in this time period too could either take you down your own direction or help build you up. So what I would ask you is, if I was your best friend in secondary school and somebody asked me, who is Joanna Rostant, what would I say?
Okay. So I went to SAGS up in the east. We grew up, and my parents still live in Valsane. So SAGS is on a highway, so it was a natural choice to go to school. It's an incredible school, building, teachers, facility, but it sits on acres of beautiful rolling grass, which allows for a lot of sporting facilities, which I loved about school. So netball, football, hockey, and as many sports as there were, other than tennis, I think, because we had tennis courts too, I got involved with and played and often captained the team. And that, the amount of sport in my life in SAGS was really, in many ways, was my introduction to leadership. But I had some very memorable experiences in SAGS that certainly I carried on. I had I hate to read. I still hate to read. I think maybe I've read 6 books in my life, and they often, when I was traveling on long distances in my corporate life and I had nobody else to talk to, I'd read a book. And in SAGS, English literature was compulsory. You had to do English literature. And I had this amazing teacher. Her name was Mrs. Moore. She was a Jamaican lady. Joy Moore was her name. She died, unfortunately, now. But I remember a time in Form 3, we were reading a book called Wind in the Willows, which is very boring. It's about a bunch of animals, moles and badgers and stuff that we don't know anything about in Trinidad. And I just couldn't really relate to this story about animals. And I was bored. And I don't like to read anyway, so it's, it's like torture. And I was sitting in an exam in class, and Miss Moore called me out of the exam, and she said, "What's the problem?" Because I was a fairly strong academic student. Yeah. She said, "What's the problem?" I said, "Mrs. Moore, first of all, I hate to read. Second of all, this book is as boring as it could possibly come. And I don't really like to write essays either. And here you are, making me read a boring book and write you an essay explaining the questions in this exam, and you're really pulling at me here." And she said, "What would you prefer to do?" And I was naturally an artist. I loved art. She said, "Would you rather color a picture, paint a picture in an exam?" So I said, "Yes, of course." So from that day on, Mrs. Moore allowed me to answer English literature via art instead of writing. Very untraditional. We're talking about the 80s, right? Because I went to SAGS until 1991. So I'm talking in late 80s. Very untraditional, non-traditional form of education. But this extremely talented teacher saw that reading and writing was not the best way to measure my understanding. She found an avenue that I was much more comfortable in, and she allowed me to do that. And of course, after that, it was full marks all the time. And what that, taught me is that it takes a lot to understand. Not everyone learns the same way. Yeah, not everyone will perform the same way. we all have different ways that we like to do things, prefer to do things. Some are introverts, some are extroverts. Yeah. And sometimes you miss the ability to reach somebody's potential just because the operating system doesn't work for them.
Yeah.
And it's not that they don't know. It's just that they would rather not communicate in that manner. And, that teacher opened the door to literature that I thought was pretty damn close because I thought it was torture.
Yeah.
And it was, it's always instances like that in school that teach you a lot. What else about SAGs? I had a phenomenal principal. Her name was Anna Mahase. She was an exceptional disciplinarian. White socks were what you had to wear in school, but we had rolled down white or folded down white socks. And some mornings coming out of assembly, she'd make us fold up our socks to make sure there weren't any stripes underneath, because stripes were not allowed. And she'd have a nail clipper coming out of assembly. For whoever had longer nails, you'd cut them. And, when Miss Mahase walked down the corridor and you smelled her perfume, because she wore a particular, I don't know what it was, but she wore a particular kind of perfume, you knew it was no-nonsense time. Mm-hmm. And that discipline is very important in life in many ways. You can play around sometimes, but you have to work hard sometimes. SAGs was great in many ways. You met girls from all different kinds of backgrounds, playing sports against Green Machine, playing sports against Malik, playing sports against St. Joseph Convent. I still will walk past a group and notice, I wouldn't remember their names, but I'd notice a girl's face from playing something at some point in school. So secondary school was fabulous. Taught me a lot of things, determined in a lot of ways who I am today. And I had another challenge in school. So I was very good at art. I loved art. Mm-hmm. Did art for O-levels. Started doing art for A-levels. And my art teacher, I can't remember her name, told me to draw a painting called, the title of the painting was Purgatory. So I loved art, of course, went to town on this painting of Purgatory. Purgatory means absolute suffering, right? Yeah. Is the meaning of purgatory. So I decided to draw this painting, painted it. I painted it in acrylic paints. And I painted a little boy in a school uniform, like a blue shirt and a khaki shorts, with a kind of slouched knapsack on his back, looking at a school building. Kind of typical Woodbrook school building, like big steps at the front, big door, little football goal on one side. Typical Trinidad primary school building looking thing. Okay. And I was so pleased with my painting. And I submitted it to my teacher. And she gave me 0. This is when I was in A-level art. And I was devastated because art was such a big part of my life. Mm-hmm. And I went home and I told my mother. And my mother couldn't believe. In my mother's view, my mother's a strong-willed personality Jamaican lady. She couldn't believe that a teacher would mark, first of all, an assignment 0, and second of all, art is in the eyes of the beholder. Exactly. That's what I saw in Purgatory. So when my mother took me into school and we met with the teacher, and she said, well, she's devastated. Why would she get 0 in this? And the teacher says, well, Purgatory is total suffocation. There needs to be daggers, and there needs to be blood, and there needs to be broken human faces. And my mother, absolute support for me, said, but this is her view of purgatory. And that day on, I did not do art in school anymore. I picked up art on my own, did it externally with an incredible art teacher. I remember her name just now. Incredible art teacher. So I actually did art as an extra A-level. I did 5 A-level subjects instead of 4 because I picked up art extra. And the rest is history because I gelled with a new art teacher and I could express myself so much better in art. Yeah. And all these things are really, teach us a lot in life and on perspectives, on how to deal with challenges and how to see other people's views in some way, because we tend to be a little blinkered in what we think. And other people have different perspectives that are full of value, and you can't take that value away.
That is true. So, what other subjects did you pursue in A-levels to lead you to what you did later on?
I did math, economics with Mr. Elder. Y'all are probably too young to know Mr. Elder. Mr. Elder was this magical economist, and he taught in a school. It was like Saturday lessons. It was not school. He taught in a place behind Kedona. And I'd go to, at that stage I was driving, so I'd go to economics lessons every Saturday morning for about 4 hours. And I would just sit there mesmerized by this man because he was just so smart. Unfortunately, I think he's died too. So I did math, economics, geography, and art.
Okay, cool.
Geography and art are my loves in life, which probably drove me to do geology in university. That's why, because geology is puzzle building of geography. So it's under the earth, so you can't see it. So there's a lot of creativity in geology because you have few data points that you have to join together to tell a story that's below the earth. And that's, quite a bit of creativity.
Yeah. Kind of art in itself.
A little bit of art. Yeah. A geophysicist who said, let's go and drill there in Guyana. He had to convince some very smart people making a lot of money to spend loads of millions of dollars to go and look for oil in Guyana, and look what he's found. There's a bit of science, but there's also a bit of creativity in that and risk-taking. And that, for me, geography and art, my two loves in school, were what determined what I did in university, which was geology.
Right. And people normally just associate geology with studying just rocks alone. But what else did the degree entail besides just...
Lots of rocks. Tons of rocks. Minerals, not the most exciting part of geology for me. For me, volcanology was probably the most exciting part. There's sedimentology, which is like beaches. Right. Not so exciting for me. Volcanology was volcanoes and glaciers and stuff. That to me was the most interesting part of geology. Lots of rocks and lots of field trips. Lots and field trips. I went to university in Canada. I went to Queen's University. And in my third year, I went on an exchange to the University of Glasgow. And Glasgow, Scotland is very strong geologically. There's lots. It's also very underpopulated. So there are lots of areas where you'll go up into the mountains for, my field trips were a week, 2 weeks up in the Scottish Highlands. And you would be looking for particular rock outcrops. And when you find them, you have to measure this and see what rock it is and all that. And then you build a puzzle of the formations across Scotland. So, cool. Real cool. Very cold, very rainy.
Yeah.
One of my field trips, I wore 8 layers of clothes because it was so cold. But very interesting. Geology is super interesting. If you're into that, it's so incredible.
And how was the university experience outside of did you work alone?
University in Canada, Canadians are very, very kind, nice people. My not my roommate, she lived next door to me, is still a good friend of mine in dorms when we lived in dorms. I would argue university in Canada has a winter, which I hate. So, but Canadian education I like Canadian education. I think it's very progressive. Yeah. I think they are very understanding. I was an international student, so for job, I couldn't work off campus because I was not a Canadian. Right. I could only work on campus. And international, there was a lottery for all the jobs on campus because obviously more people than jobs were available wanted to take the jobs, right? But international students bypassed the lottery. You were guaranteed an interview as an international student because they saw that you didn't have the ability to go and work off campus. So, you still had to prove yourself in an interview, but at least you were guaranteed an interview. So I had 2 jobs on campus. I taught a second-year mineralogy course, and I also worked in a bar. And that social side of a bar on campus, that social side of university to me is a key part of belonging to the community. Yes, you have friends, and yes, you lime every weekend, and yes, you have your groups in class. I understand all of that, but my bar work in particular was really, it's like, you belonged. Because you're not only you're there for school, but you're also part of the bar that everybody goes to. And of course, as a Trinidadian with a nice accent, I always got the most tips.
Yeah, people who get into bartending, they tend to get good social skills out of it.
Oh, yeah.
Meet a lot of people, too.
Meet a lot of people.
Become recognizable.
And it's a line, right? So you finish studying and it's 8 o'clock and you have to go to work. But you're not going to work to work in a bookshop or teach mineralogy to second-year students. You're actually going to work in a place with a vibe.
Yes, lively.
You know, and what you doing, you love doing. You know, we love to line, we love to drink, we love to hear music, we like to talk to people. So yeah, I would strongly recommend people doing university, doing that as part of. And you know, it also teaches you very good time management skills because you're committed to working in the bar. I think I worked in the bar 3 or 4 times a week. So you had to do your studying and your preparation for school, class around those hours.
Yeah.
But wouldn't the bar work be like more in like the night?
Yeah.
So the night, so like 8 to like 12
Yeah,
or something?
8 to like 1 or 2, whatever the closing time
You
was.
didn't find out hard to implement into your schedule? Like to work
No, you find a way, right? Where's a will, there's a way. And to me, there was more positive in working in a bar than non-working in a bar.
Right.
You know, because I really enjoyed working in a bar. But Queen's was a great university. I mean, I strongly recommend people, my sons now go on an international posting for one of their years because it's a nice break from where you are for 2, you go to away for 1, then you come back. And you get to learn 2 different learning. Well, I learned 2 different learning systems. So did Mark in his first year because he went to England first. You learn 2 different learning systems, but also you're like on an almost school holiday for a year.
Yeah.
You have to study and you have to work hard and all that. But you're just learning, meeting a whole new set of people. So in Canada, it's mostly Canadians on campus, right? Because that's just the way it is. In Scotland, when I went to Glasgow for the year, it was Germans, it was Greek, it was English, it was Spanish, it was French, because at that stage there was no Brexit, so there was an easy movement of people from England to Europe. So my two best friends were 2 German fellas. I went hitchhiking around an island with them for 3 days with no money.
Sounds like fun.
You know? I mean, if my children told me they were doing that now, I think I'll pass out, but... And I didn't tell my parents at the time.
Yeah, of course not.
But it was great. Imagine you have no money and you're just riding in the back of farmers' vans for 3 days, sleeping in farm huts. It was fabulous.
Yeah, that sounds very fun.
It sounds like real fun.
The experiences you don't tell your parents that you have the most fun with.
No, you only tell them after.
Yeah, when they
after
can't
for sure.
A couple of years later too, so like
Yeah. So it was Carnival weekend, right? Of course, the big Trinity line was down in London because that's where most people go to school. Right. I was up in Glasgow. Carnival weekend. Carnival in Trinidad, which meant equal carnival fetes in London, right? Okay. So all my friends in London, you come in? Yeah, I'll come in. But I can't afford the train because the train must have been £40 and as a student, you know, you have your money, no money, and your parents ain't paying for that. So on campus, 2 days before on Glasgow campus, 2 days before the weekend, they advertise an anti-Nazi march in London where you pay £1 to go on a bus down to London and back up. Well, £1? I did.
Yeah,
for sure.
It's Carnival weekend. The line in London, again, they're for £1. So I buy my ticket. I jump in my anti-Nazi bus, go into the anti-Nazi, it was an anti-Nazi protest in London. So they were bussing us down for the protest, and then they were going to bus us back after the weekend. So it's like, boom, bing, perfect, boom, we in. Yeah. So, you know, call all the friends, right, I come in, plan everything. So I jump in the anti-Nazi bus. Well, anti-Nazi protests against who? Nazis. So before the bus left the bus terminal in Glasgow, the Nazis stoned the bus.
Oh, shucks.
Stone, like a stone came through my glass about this far away from my head.
Wait, while you were in the bus?
Yeah. We hadn't even left the bus terminal yet. Everybody we now all sitting in the bus ready to go to this anti-Nazi. Yeah, anti-Nazi, you know. The Nazis come and they stone the bus bad. So we couldn't leave because the buses were damaged.
Oh, shucks.
So we had to abandon the anti-Nazi protest bus. Stuck in this bus terminal. Of course, everybody else on the bus is Scotland, so they gone, or Scottish, so they gone home to their family. This little island girl stuck on the bus. Well, the bus driver comes to me and says, well, love, where are you going? I go to University of Glasgow. I'm not accustomed to this. I'm from Trinidad. Anyway, cut a long story short, the man puts me in his car, the bus driver, puts me in his car and drops me back to my dorm where I was living. Yeah. And then,
that's nice.
Yeah. But I didn't tell my parents at the time I was going on an anti-Nazi protest to go to London.
They don't need to know that.
They nearly died by a rock.
But when I was petrified after that rock hit the glass, I'm like, oh, y'all can't believe what I did.
That's a story for 3 years after.
Yeah.
Catch them off guard.
Cut a long story short, they felt so bad. My parents felt so bad that they told me to buy the train tickets, and I went to all the fets.
Nice. Sounds great. Did you get to travel around Europe more, like to other places besides like Ireland?
Not really. The truth is I didn't have the money to do it.
Okay.
And I did a bit of traveling between England and Scotland. I had good Bajan friends who went to school in University of Edinburgh.
Yeah.
So I did a lot between Edinburgh and Glasgow.
Edinburgh is in the north.
Yeah.
This is right there.
Just an hour away.
Okay.
So, and very reasonable to get there and so on. Of course, I'll go and stay by them. And I did a lot of traveling through Scotland with geology, with my field trip. I did more field trips in the 1 year in Scotland, probably twice more field trips in the 1 year in Scotland than I did in the other 3 years in Canada. Canada didn't have half as many field trips as Scotland did. But as goes like Paris and so on, no, I never had the money to go there.
And do you think all those field trips and field work helped you get a job after?
Oh, yeah. I was hired on campus
In
Canada
Queens?
by Schlumberger. Yeah. I had a job before I physically graduated.
That's the best thing.
It was wonderful. So I graduated my last exam was May. I saved my money and I went to Australia for a month, my money that I worked in the bars on campus and so. I saved my money and I went to Australia for a month, came back from my graduation in end of May, and I started with Schlumberger right after that. Like literally, I never came home. I went straight to work.
That's real value. And you started with them doing what?
I was an engineer, a logging engineer offshore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I worked first in Houston for a couple of months. And then I got sent to Alaska, because that's another story. I spent about a year in Alaska, and then I got sent to Venezuela after that, and then Trinidad. So Alaska, when I got hired by Schlumberger, they said, well, yes, yeah, we want to hire you. Do you have a preference of where you want to go? I said, I'd just love to go to somewhere warm and close to Trinidad, because I was engaged to Adam at the time.
Mm-hmm.
No, wasn't engaged, but going out with Adam. And I said, look, I've spent a couple of years away. I just really want to go to somewhere warm and close to Trinidad. Mm-hmm. They sent me to Alaska in winter. But that's what Schlumberger does, right? They test you and they strengthen you and so. And as much as I did not want to go to Alaska, it was an unbelievable experience. It's a physical environment like you have no idea. You cannot, as a girl from an island, you can't understand what Alaska is like. And the rigs in Alaska, because I worked offshore, the rigs in Alaska above the north coast of Alaska, so it's now in the North Pole, like Santa. Right. The rigs are in the North Pole.
Yeah.
So it's minus 70 degrees, minus 90 degrees. I'd had to wear Arctic clothes. No daylight in December. 2 full days with no daylight, like pitch black dark. Mm-hmm. I got there in September and we lost about 15 minutes light every day. So into October and November, you had maybe 2 hours of daylight. And then come into December, there's none. You wake up in the morning, you go outside, it's black. You go to work, you come back, it's black. You wake up the next day, it's black. No light.
That must be so depressing.
It was very depressing. And it also alters the human brain. So we had to sleep with not a UV, a light, a daylight. We were required to sleep with a daylight lamp so that we got the human requirement for daylight, whatever it is, rays. Yeah. Because the lack of sun alters the human body. We are accustomed to sun and night. Mm-hmm. And when you have so much darkness, it changes your body. Imagine white and flat as far as the eye can see. All the glaciers I ever learned in geology in university, I could never understand, right? Because I don't come from a place that has glaciers. So I could never understand a mountain of ice. Like when I was taught the concepts, I couldn't visualize it. And I got to Alaska and there were these mountains of ice. And they were amazing. And the whole, well, no vegetation, but the whole animal life, like polar bears.
So polar bears.
Eskimos, caribou, Arctic fox. I mean, the Northern Lights. Yeah. Northern Lights are magical.
That could look so good on a rig. There's no light pollution either, so it's
No,
just
there's no light.
There's no light.
There's no light. I almost got fired in Schlumberger in
Alaska.
how come?
When you go on the North Slope, they call it the rigs where the rigs are the North Slope. They're very, very specific safety briefings because the environment is so dangerous to humans because it's so cold.
Right.
I mean, we had our jeeps, our vans for work had to be plugged in because they would freeze up and everything would break.
Yeah.
So they have to stay running 24 hours. Anyway, so you get this major, very important safety briefing. And the biggest part of the safety briefing is if you're in a vehicle, you never get out and leave the vehicle. If you get into an accident or something happens, you never leave the vehicle because the vehicle has enough gas to keep you warm for 3 days. And there's a emergency food pack in the back seat of every vehicle that will feed you for 3 days.
Okay.
And they believe that someone will find you within 3 days, which is fair. The rigs are like a network, right? They're not many. There are about 4 or 5 rigs up there when I was there. And they're connected by ice roads. So when the sea is liquid during the summer, there are these ice roads. Okay. But during the winter, the sea freezes and the ice roads remain higher than the sea. But imagine the sea, like waves you'll see. Well, it becomes frozen in mid-wave. So you get these break off of ice.
Yeah.
In the sea, which tends to powder after a while. Okay. So I was working one night at a rig, and one of my tools went down, and I did not have the whatever part it was to fix, but another rig had the part. So I jumped in my truck at about, I would say 1 in the morning, because I was working in night shift, because I was junior, right? So junior people get a night shift. Very story of life. So I was working in night shift at 1 a.m., my partner and I, because we always work together. And we had to go to this other rig to get this part. And of course, I was junior, so I guess sent for the part. So in those days, we didn't have cell phones, right? This is 96, 95, 96, somewhere around there. No cell phones, but you had beepers. You all probably don't even know what a beeper is. Google it, right? So we had these beepers.
It's just that thing like you put it on your waistband and you just like, I actually have no idea how it works.
You get beeped, and then there's a text message on it.
So you could actually type on it? Or?
No, I don't think you could type on it, but I got a message. Yeah, you must be able to type on it.
Voice message?
No, like big old digits saying, picking you up at 3 or whatever. That's what beepers were. So anyway, I'm driving on this ice road. Yeah. It was December, and at that stage, the side of the roads, they were now, at that time of year, they're clearing all the ice roads of snow. So they push all the snow to the side of the ice roads, which creates snowbanks. So it's soft, powdery snow. Yeah, okay. So the beeper went off in my truck, and I looked down to read the beeper, and I ran off the road into the snowbank. I wasn't hurt. I had on my seat belt, etc. But you're in about an 8-foot-high mountain of powdery snow that you can't get out of a truck because there's no traction. So I couldn't reverse the truck out because it's just in the powder snow, right?
How much of the truck went in the mountain?
I would say 3/4 of a truck. So I sat in this. I think it was about 4 in the morning, because I knew at 6 or 7 the supply trucks would be bringing supplies for the rigs, because all the rigs had a unit where you lived. Like a container where you lived, and they fed you. So it's all food and water and everything goes every morning. And I sat in that truck and I said, well, it's 4 o'clock. I know I have 3 days supply, and they'll be here just now at 6, so I'll just wait. 2 minutes later, it seemed like about a year. 2 minutes later, I look up and I can see a pumping station. So where a rig has drilled, when the rig leaves, they replace it with a pumping station. And they have these all over the North Slope because some of the pipelines come into them and then they transfer into the big cross Alaska pipeline. Mm-hmm. So I saw this pumping station, definitely not far. So I said, you know what? I'll just get out and walk, because the pumping station was lit. So I assumed it was manned.
Yeah.
So I said, well, it's right there. Can't be that far. It's 4 o'clock, 2 hours seems like a long time to wait for people to come and get me. Of course, I can't communicate. So no, you can't type a message on a pager. Because I could get a message, but I could not send a message back to my partner or my base.
Yeah, okay.
So I look at this pumping station, which, man, is right there. So I say, you know what, I'll get out and walk, which is against all safety briefings on the North Slope. You never leave your truck. But I just figured it was right there and I'll walk. But what I didn't understand, it was my truck was here. I thought it was here. The road actually did this to get it. And remember, it's ice roads, right? So you can only walk where the road is because the rest of it is these powder dunes, for want of a better word. And so I started walking on this road. And about 2 hours later, I was still walking on the road.
What?
With frostbite on my nose, frostbite on my ears, because it's like minus 76. And just kind of falling apart a bit. And thankfully, at 6 o'clock, one of the engineers came. He was like the morning shift of this pumping station, so he had to come and, I guess, take recordings or check stuff. And he picked me up. He turned into the road to go to the pumping station, and all our jackets had reflective tape.
Right.
And he picked up my reflective tape moving. So he came and picked me up and took me, and I was safe and all that, but I almost got fired because I went against every safety briefing in the North Slope. Completely my fault. Completely my wrong. They had every right to fire me in 1996 because I put myself at a lot of risk. I mean, there's polar bears everywhere, the most dangerous animal. I put my company at a risk. You know, it was just a really stupid thing to do.
So how come they didn't fire you?
I don't know. Up to this day, I don't know. Maybe they saw my pathetic little face and felt sorry for me. I'm not quite sure, but I get away.
Trini lady eaten by polar bears.
I was probably the only Trini person to ever go and work on the North Slope too.
She's giving us a bad reputation.
Yeah, boy, not bad.
Oh, that's actually crazy.
So after Alaska, now you went to...
After Alaska, I went to Venezuela,
Oh, Lord. Right, I don't know.
which
I
was
have a
nice
story there.
nice and warm, but I think even more challenges than Alaska.
Why is
Because
that?
when I went to Venezuela in mid-90s, the male culture of Venezuela was still very strong. I'm sure it is today as well, but in those days it was even stronger. And imagine you take a male-dominated culture and you top it onto a male-dominated industry, which is the energy industry. So you get plenty machismo weight being pushed around. And I worked in 2 places in Venezuela. I worked in Ciudad Ojeda, which is a onshore field development. So you actually live in a container, and you walk to the rig or you drive to the rig. So that's very controlled. That was no problem for me to live there. It was a cute little town, real nice. Had a good time there. And then I also worked in Lake Maracaibo, which is offshore. So it's a big lake in the middle of Venezuela, right? Very rich in energy. So most of the rigs are there. Most of the action is there in Venezuela. And it was largely okay. Nice guys working onshore, lots of Europeans, because Maersk was one of the companies owning drilling rigs. And I think Maersk is a French company. So lots of Europeans working on the rig. So really nice experience until I had to work on a rig owned by Lago Ven. Lago means lake in Spanish, Ven, Venezuela. So imagine it's a national company that works in Lake Maracaibo called Lago Ven. And the chopper took me out to the rig, and we landed on the heliport, and there was people scurrying around.
Right.
And I was there. So, of course, we worked in 2-man shifts. So my shift partner and I were coming to take our shift on the rig for, I guess, 2 weeks. I can't remember.
Yeah.
And exchange with the 2 fellas who were before we crossed. So I can see them kind of flutting around the heli deck. So I said, well, what's wrong? Well, the company man, who is the man in charge of a rig, is a Venezuelan. And he said, no, he got wind that I was a woman when I got off the chopper. I don't know why Joanna is not a male and female name, and I was on the manifest, but I guess he didn't read the manifest. But he got knowledge that I was on the rig at the time that I landed on the heli deck, and he said, no mujeres aquí, which means no women here. And I was not allowed to walk down the steps from the heli deck. I wasn't allowed to go on any part of the rig. By then the chopper had left, so I couldn't get back on the chopper. So he actually made me spend the night on the heli deck, which is a concrete structure with a big H on it that you see on top of a rig. Yeah. So I spent the night under the stars, the Venezuelan stars. My crew member came and brought me blankets and pillows, and I guess some dinner, because I spent the night there. I wasn't allowed to go down the steps to the bathroom. I wasn't allowed to leave the heli deck, because he said he didn't want any women on his rig. And then the first chopper in the morning, when they came to bring supplies, took me back to shore.
Wait, so did he come and tell you that to your face?
No.
He just sent somebody?
Yeah, he sent his foot soldiers.
He's a wimp, boy.
That is crazy.
That must have been really disheartening. I'm sure
Yeah.
after that you don't want to work anymore.
And
You
you're
know,
young at the
I was
time.
23, maybe 22. You're very resilient when you're young. I felt like, you know, the world as it was at my feet because I just graduated and I had a great degree and I was working for a great company and this was just part of it. I obviously was very naive, very, you know, corporately naive that this could possibly even happen to me. But, you know, out of all bad always comes good. I had a couple guys come up on the heli deck and keep me company for most of the night who were wonderful. I got back to shore and the head of Schlumberger actually met me at the chopper and apologized profusely, etc. And after that, you know, he was very concerned. And he said, well, what can we do? And I said, just don't ever do that to any other woman. That's just not what we do as a company. Yeah. And so we made different rules and regulations for women going offshore after that. So, you know, sometimes you have to have an experience that hopefully you can go through that changes the course for people behind you. Right. Like I love to run, and I run lots of marathons. Not lots, I'd like to run more. And one of my dreams was always to run the Boston Marathon, which I happened to get to qualify to run in 2017. So I, you know, diligently went to Boston and ran a marathon. And the day before the marathon, there's a great Adidas store right almost on the finishing line of the marathon. Like the garbage bin outside the Adidas store was where one of the bombs were when the marathon got bombed. That's how close it was to the finish line. So the two bombs that they placed for the Boston Marathon when the guy bombed that marathon that year were about 100 feet before the finish line. Okay. So this is where this Adidas store is. Of course, strategically placed. Boston Marathon is like carnival for Boston, right? It's incredibly important to Boston. It is the most blow mind marathon. Amazing. My mom and dad came. My father was a sportsman years ago, and he just soaked in all the sports culture of the Boston Marathon. Anyway, so I'd gone to the Adidas store to buy a hat saying the marathon, or I can't remember what. And this lady is outside, and there's like news reporters around her. And I looked at her, and it was Catherine Switzer. I don't know if you all know who she is.
No, I'm not sure.
She is the first woman to ever run a marathon, namely Boston Marathon, when women were not allowed to run marathons many, many years ago. So the year I ran, 2017, was the 50th anniversary of her running the Boston Marathon. So she ran in, 1967, right? 50 years before 2017. So she was in front of... Now, she would be, I'm a little girl from the islands, but I do respect women who changed the world. Yeah. And I knew who this lady was, because having had a love for I appreciate running, and I'm a lady who runs, I appreciate that this lady was the first person to ever try to run a marathon, and she broke barriers for all women running marathons after that. Yeah. She signed up. Her husband was a runner, and the husband said, you come in this race. You want to run a marathon? Come in the race. So she signed up as K. Switzer. She didn't use her first name. So they didn't pick up in the sign-ups that she was a woman. And there's a very, very, you can Google it, very famous picture of the race officials trying to throw her out the race while she was running her race. And a bunch of male runners almost protecting her from them. Very famous picture. And it is that woman that allowed women to run marathons. And here was I, like, what luck in my life. First of all, I'm running the Boston Marathon. My husband, my best friend, my parents are there watching me. It's like, already it's the best week of my life. Mm-hmm. And I go into this Adidas store and I meet the legend of female running.
Yeah.
You know, what a great experience. And I spoke to her and I said, you know, you're such an inspiration. And her response to me is, we all are an inspiration to someone. You got to work it. That's what that lady told me. Like a little nobody from Trinidad.
That's crazy.
Yeah, real cool.
And then, so after Venezuela now, what did you do?
So after Venezuela, I got transferred back to Trinidad, which was by far the best part of my energy career. The men working offshore Trinidad are like heaven sent. They're like brothers. They love their oil field. They love the fact that they contribute so much to the economy. They're kind. They're caring. They love having ladies offshore. I mean, just like Dudu's working offshore. Really, it was such. And I had been away in school for 4 years. I was probably working 2 or 3 years by then. So I haven't really been back to Trinidad for 7 years. But it was so warm to work offshore and see the pride that the guys take in what they do. And they're just, you know, I would barely pick up a wrench and 4 of them would run around and say, no, you leave that. I'll do it for you. Don't worry. What do you want? What do you want for dinner? The cook wants to know what Joanna wants for dinner. I'm like, Joanna, whatever you all want. No, it really is. Trinidad's oil field is a special, well, from what I have seen, the ones I have seen, Trinidad's oil field is a really, really special oil field.
Yeah, I heard it was nice. I heard like the food is really good and the pay is really good.
The food is good. Lots of steak, if you like steak. Lots of steak.
And people get paid really well. That's probably
people get paid really well. But, you know, it's kind of very tiring on personal life. You know, wives, if you ask me, the hardest profession in the world is an oil field wife. It's the husband is never there, the father is never there. It's so, you know, it changes every day. Oh, you need to go today. And, I'm supposed to come back on Saturday, but I can't come back on Saturday because my replacement is sick, so I have to stay on 2 more weeks. It's very, very tough for an oil field wife, especially an expat oil field wife. When I lived in Venezuela, you know, everybody says, oh, yeah, expat wife, your husband makes so much money, you're living a nice life, you're living in a camp. It's not. They're always lonely. They always have children by themselves who are always disappointed that daddy is missing a football game or missing a concert in school. Or, you know, it's really, really tough. So have respect for oil field wives.
Could imagine. But Schlumberger is an oil services company. So how did that work? Were you like on contract on one rig for a certain amount of time, or were you just like go in doing jobs and go in between rigs, or were you like stationed?
Yeah, I ran at the time. They trained me in a particular tool. Which was oil and gas is resistive and water is conductive. Okay. So we used to run a tool that measured resistivity, a specific kind of tool that measured resistivity. So you can pick up where there was hydrocarbon versus where there was water. Okay. And somebody trained me in a particular tool. So where that tool was required around the world, I went. And in my time working for them, it happened to be Alaska, Venezuela, and then Trinidad.
What were your parents' thoughts of you going out on these oil fields in this strictly male-dominated
field? My father thought I was an idiot, like crazy. You wanted to wear coveralls and boots to go to work? I thought it was pretty cool because I didn't know any girls who worked offshore. And, you know, second children always like to be different, and I wanted to be that person. My mom was totally supportive. I mean, she's always been a super supportive mother, and I knew I wouldn't work offshore forever. I knew it was a period of time. Women can't work offshore forever. Like, it doesn't work. You know, so it's often you work offshore for 2, 3, 5 years and then you move into an office. I didn't last in Schlumberger as long as 5 years. I worked for them for about 3 years. And I decided to give it up to go and I worked with BG Group in Trinidad for 17 years after that. But yeah, I think my parents, it was a mixture of pride and craziness. Like, they were very proud to say that their daughter worked for Schlumberger and she worked offshore and so, but my dad was like, I don't get it. Yeah.
So when you went to BG, what did you start off as? Like,
started off as a geologist.
And
had a great time in BG. BG was 17 years, was amazing. It's an amazing company. I grew from a middle 20s to early 40s person there. Nicest great time in your career. Worked with incredibly bright people. I mean, still remember their names: John Harris, Oscar Prieto, Derek Hudson. Incredibly bright men that I worked with, and I learned so much from that I carried into my own business. So I started as a geologist. I didn't stay in geology very long. I jumped into what we would call commercial, which is like gas deals, business, etc. I was very, very lucky. So I worked in BG from the mid-90s to the early, maybe 2012, 2013, I can't remember. But at that stage, Trinidad's oil field was very prolific. The terms of the contracts allowed us to drill economically. So we were incentivized to go and drill. So in the oil industry, when you have oil or gas, there's plenty of work. When you don't have, it's frustrating, right? So we drilled on the East Coast first, then we drilled on the North Coast, and we came back on the East Coast. But while I was there, 1999, we started the first Atlantic train. And then 22 and 23, we opened up train 2, 3. And then train 4 came after. And with Atlantic, we provided a huge amount of demand for hydrocarbons. So you had great commercial terms to drill, and you had a market that was very, the prices were very strong. So you had a perfect recipe to go after and find hydrocarbons and sell them to market and make money for the country. Not only the company I worked for, but the country made substantial amounts of money because all the oil and gas is found via production sharing contract where the company shares the production and the government shares the production. So I was lucky that the time I worked in BG, there was fabulous activity. Atlantic was the highlight of my career. There was so many deals to be done, so many cargo trades to be done, so much oil and gas to go after because the whole value chain was there. And we had just started up the whole North America LNG chain, and then it grew into Europe and the Far East. And it was just an amazing time for me. I mean, you're working with bright people, incredibly bright people. Your company's making good money. Your country. I mean, I felt like a Trinidadian. I felt like I was contributing to GDP because I was part of the value chain. And in the time I was in BG, we were as a country, we were so economically viable that I mean, I'll never forget, I made a chart for the staff to see that this was when the government was available to afford GATE, which opened tertiary education for many people in this country who weren't able to access it. I went to school with very bright girls who just could not afford to go to UE until there was GATE. And it was the money in the system that allowed GATE. As crazy as it sounds, we built Movie Town. We built Price Smart. We had GATE. We built the Arthur Lockjack School of Business. So there was all this commercial and educational development in this country that I felt I was a big part of because I was bringing it out the ground and making it happen. So as a Trinidadian, I had like crazy pride that I worked for a company who was, allowing people who could not afford to go to UE to be able to go to UE. Yeah. And you saw the whole economic and social development in the country. We fought crime better. We interest rates went down for borrowing houses. It was just stimulation. And, this is in mid-90s till early 2000s, that it was just such an incredible time to be working in Trinidad. And it taught me so much in that period that I then took into our own company, Chuck E. Cheese, that we opened the first store in 2014. So I was very lucky. The truth is I was very lucky to come out of the blocks of university, work for a solid company like Schlumberger, take jamming offshore, understand what I don't want to do in life, which was work offshore. Then when I had the opportunity to move into a local company, I was lucky enough to get hired by the second largest energy company in the country, who had tons of gas, who was a shareholder in Atlantic, who supplied to Point Lisas, and in my view, was building Trinidad to be, a better place. And I'm very grateful that I got that, sort of catapult of experience to then take into my own company.
And you did make it pretty far up like the corporate ladder within BG.
Yeah, man.
How did you do that? Like, what is the process of going from just a geologist to how high up you said you got to?
Work hard. That's how you do it.
Working hard alone.
That's the only way. Work hard.
Yeah,
Prove yourself
that's
constantly.
what everybody says.
Everybody
you have to work
says
hard.
work hard.
But what does working hard entail? Like, what did it entail for you in your experience?
Was it competitive? Do you have to?
It was very competitive. And don't forget, I am a female in a male-dominated industry, which is owned by a multinational. So I didn't work for it wasn't a national company. I worked for a multinational. So the competition was not only male-female in a male-dominated, but it was also local, international. And the truth is, you have to reward performance and penalize non-performance. And BG was very close to their heart. Derek, who ran BG, took performance very, very, very seriously. And he rewarded performance and he penalized non-performance. And that's how you build a high-performing company. But, like everything else, it's not easy. You have to work long hours. I'm not saying long hours means working hard. Working hard, I mean, is working smart. Working hard. I am not a proponent for being at your desk from 6 a.m. to 7 in the night, because I don't believe the human can work like that. Yeah. And what I could tell you is many of my most creative deals and smart ideas were not built at my desk working 16 hours. It was built running on Mayaro Beach. I would get good ideas and I'd take it into the office and I'd make it happen. But I also had a very supportive organization around me. Remember, I started in BG when I was a young, mid-20-year-old, almost fresh out of university. I stayed there for 17 years. I built trust. I built reputation. That does not happen overnight. Yeah. That happens by actions. I don't care what anybody tells me. You don't build trust and reputation with words. You build it with actions. You prove yourself. Yeah. And you prove yourself time and time again. And your reputation is as good as your last deal, if you ask me. So mess up a deal, your reputation goes down. So you always have to outperform yourself every day at work. And I'm not saying outperform other people. Outperform yourself. Do better than the last deal. Knock somebody's socks off more next time. If you thought you were really good last time, you really weren't that good. My dad, who's a sportsman, used to always tell me when I was running, if you feel you're tired, you only reach 50% of your body's potential. You have 50% more to go. And I used to take it into work. The truth is, you think you do a great deal? You only probably did 50% of what you could have done. Go and bust that deal again and do a better deal next time. And that is, how did I climb the corporate ladder? I had a very supportive organization behind me. I had senior men, mostly men, who believed in what I did. That is, you can't pay for that. And you also can't, that's something you earn. It's like respect. And you have to build that over time, and you build that through actions. You build that through doing, and you build that through explaining, showing. So I had the experience. I knew every part of the business after 17 years. I had very supportive senior teams, both internationally and Trinidad. Continue to stay on top of your game. Don't do what Ronaldo did yesterday. Look where he ended up. Bench on more. You can't, emotions do have a place in performance.
Were all the men supportive that you were working with? Or did they have some that kind of felt intimidated by you or something and maybe try to be like, this woman coming for my job, let me...
Yeah, lots were. Mm-hmm. Uh-huh. And sometimes I did take their jobs. But, it's par for the course, right? That's what high-performing companies have. But, it's challenge and be challenged. Yeah. I'd go to my boss and I'd say, this is the deal, I think. And he'd say, no, Joanna, that's nonsense. And I'd get pissed. And I'd say, the man doesn't understand. I worked so long on this. Blah, 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 blah. But the truth is, I didn't work hard enough. He's right. Mm-hmm. And I had staff, I managed staff, many staff over the years. And there was this very smart girl working for me when I was running our Atlantic shareholding, which was, for about 2 years of my career, I ran BG's shareholding in Atlantic. And I had this girl working for me. And in a certain corporate level in BG, you get a car. Okay. And she was the level below getting a car. And she wanted really to get to this level. And I was her boss. And her annual performance, she was very bright. Yeah. She was not dead. She was not a dud. She was very bright. She came to do her annual performance, and I don't dance around people, and I don't have a political bone in my body, so you only get honesty from me. In fact, her fault. And she came to do her performance review. And I said, okay, you did this really well. You did this really well. You did this. But there were about 3 things she did not achieve. I can't remember what they were, but they were, whatever it was material. Mm-hmm. So I believe, in terms of your performance, I think it was good. And I would not recommend you to jump to the next corporate level at this stage. The woman got so vexed with me. First of all, she was like emotional, right? Like she was so upset because she had so thought that it was going to happen. And then she got angry with me. And she, was not at all happy with it. And then about 2 weeks later, she came to my office and, Joanna, can I talk to you? I said, sure, come in. I said, what's up? She says, tell me what I have to do because I'm going to get this. I said, good, sit down. This is what you need to do. This, you need to deliver X, blah, 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 Y. I said, I'm telling you that. If you do that, then in my heart, I could promote you. But right now, this is not worthy of a promotion. And I don't want you to take this. Well, I did say personally. I said, it is a learning. That girl went away. And if I told her deliver something in 6 months, I think she delivered it in 2. And if I told her that her target was 700, she hit 900. Whatever it was I set out for her, which was very was very tough, she beat, and she beat bad. And she came to me within the 6 months or after the 6 months. Within the 6 months, I called into my office and I said, you realize what you could do. She said, so you think I could get the promotion to whatever level, whatever it was called at that stage, in my next performance review? So I said, no. I spoke to Derek already, you'll get it now. Which was out of process because it was an annual review system. So whatever it was not at the time. And the girl, I think she almost jumped out her chair and kissed me. But the point was, and she tells me to this day, whenever I see her out, that is the best conversation she's ever had on her performance. Because as hard as it was for her to hear me say you're not good enough, she wasn't good enough. And you have to go through that whole emotional, upset crying. Then you have to be pissed with me and vexed with me and malign me in the corridor. Yes, I get that, all of that. You have to go through that stage until hopefully your self-awareness gets a little higher to say, right, let me look at this let me sit back and look at this objectively, and she's right. But I want to know what to do. That's what I want to know, I want your guidance to tell me what exactly I need to do. And once I gave her that guidance, off to the races. And she was a fantastic performer. Mm-hmm. Fantastic. So, I can't say a bad thing about my time in BG. Yes, there were challenges. Yes, people doubted you. Yes, you had to constantly prove yourself. But you have to prove yourself every day. You have to prove yourself to your children. You have to prove yourself in your own business. You have to prove yourself. You have to prove yourself in sport. You have to prove yourself to your friends. That's something that doesn't go away ever. Mm-hmm. And but BG was an incredible place to learn, and to grow and to work. And I'm very, very grateful that I had that experience in those years of my life.
Yeah. Eventually, you got a little tired of the corporate world. So.
Yeah. I'm not a politics person. It was a bit of a push and a pull, right? That I was waning in the corporate world in terms of self-motivation, I would say. And then my children I have 3 boys, and the oldest was about 13 or 14 at the time, and then my second was about 9. And I found the oldest was a bit derailing a bit from, because when you reach a certain level in the corporate world, you have to work very long hours. And Adam, my husband, was a pilot at the time. So when he wasn't there and I was working long hours, these kids were none of us were there. And my middle son, my first one was, I thought, kind of derailing. But my middle son, I think, suffered the most from my demanding time in my career of the absence of a mom at home. Like, I'd just go home and his little face would just be vacant, drawn. And it comes in a time in a mom's life when you have to say, all right, the corporate, the professional life is going really, really good. But at what expense? And I got to that sort of self-awareness point where the corporate world wasn't really where I wanted to be professionally anymore. But also, I felt like I wasn't doing my job as a mother, or the mother I wanted to be. I was doing my job as a mother. I was ticking the boxes, but that's not the mother I wanted to be.
Yeah.
So I made a radical change, and I left the corporate world, and my sister and I bought the Chuck E. Cheese franchise and took that on. And as much as glamorous as running your own company might sound, it's much more harder than working in the corporate world. Much. Because the checkbook stops at you. Exactly. Every decision you make.
It's more stressful too.
Very much more stressful. But at least to a degree, you're kind of more in control of your own stress. And the biggest thing for me is I became in control of my calendar. So when I worked for in the corporate world, if somebody wanted a meeting at 6 p.m., I had to be there. Regardless if my children were sick at home and really needed mom to come home. I had to be in a meeting, or if somebody wanted a meeting at 7 a.m., I had to be there. Even if my child wanted me to drop him to school to see his, cricket recital or something, I had to miss it. So, one of the benefits of running your own business is that you are in control of your own calendar, mostly. Yeah, the business is demanding. I'm not saying no. Some days I work 16 hours. Some days I go to sports days. But I'm able to do those balances now, whereas when you are working for someone, that's a lot more difficult.
And how did you manage to choose Chuck E. Cheese's? Because I think that's such an interesting and unique business.
Yeah, it's a funny story too. So my sister was working in finance sector, and I was in the energy sector, and we both came to a conclusion that we needed a change. And coincidentally, she has 2 children, so her husband and 2 children, and my husband and 3 children. We had planned a vacation in Orlando to Disney World. Yeah. So my children were maybe, 12, 8 and little. I can't remember. Her children were I definitely remember her son was 6. And we got to Disney World, and of course we all pay our $100 or $120 US to get into Disney World. So it's like $500 just to walk in the door, US dollars, in those days. And she paid $400. And we go into Disney World, and, it's lines, it's summer, it's plenty hot, everything expensive. But the children are having a good time, except her 6-year-old, who just cried and cried and cried. And he said, I don't like this place, too much lines. I just want to go to Chuck E. Cheese. So the 4 of us, Christina and her husband, and Adam and I, were like, what the hell is Chuck E. Cheese? We had no idea what Chuck E. Cheese is. I am not entertainment person. I don't know anything about video games. I don't even eat cheese, so I don't even eat pizza. So we're like, well, what the hell is Chuck E. Cheese? So anyway, to stop the child from crying, we decide to take him to Chuck E. Cheese the next day. The Chuck E. Cheese in Orlando, where they've now redone it, but the Chuck E. Cheese in Orlando was a dump. They've now redone it beautifully, but it was awful. And at the time. Right. And we walk into Chuck E. Cheese, and I think together we spent, the fine 9 of us, we spent $60 US. Christina and I had wine. The fellas had beer. We all had pizza. Well, not me. I had pizza without cheese. We all had pizza and wings and fries and salad and whatnot. And these children played till the cows came home. In the game room, up the climbing things, this one, that one. And then, after all of that, they won tickets and won a prize. So everybody left happy. We just couldn't understand how wonderful this concept was for family life. Yeah. Because you walk in, the grown-ups have a line, because there's a little bit of alcohol and there's pizza and so you sit in your seats. The children don't even take you on, so nobody's nagging you. They're just playing, having a ball, because Chuck E. Cheese slogan is where a kid can be a kid. So no shoes, you don't want shoes, take out shoes. You want to eat popcorn? Eat popcorn. You want to walk around with drinks? Walk around with drinks. Whatever you want to do, where a kid can be a kid. Let the kids play. Yeah. So these children just had the time of their life, and they all won a prize. So it's like magic. Yeah. And when we got back to Trinidad, my sister and I said, oh my God, will do so well. We think it'll do so well in Trinidad. So we contacted Chuck E. Cheese in Dallas, and this Ecuadorian man answers the phone and he says, no way, you calling from Trinidad? I set up TGA Fridays in Trinidad right around Carnival, and I love chutney soca. And I think Chuck E. Cheese would do really well in Trinidad. So we got, again, the stars align, right? Yeah. We call, the man who answers the phone knows Trinidad already, set up TGI Fridays, understands the market, and knows Chuck E. Cheese would do well, and is looking for someone to invest in Trinidad. Boom. Perfect. Magic. And then we got interviewed by the owners of the company. And of course, I had 3 children. Christina had 2 children. And the owner of the company is like, my God, you all are our target market. You are who we want to entertain. You are who we market to. This could not be better. And as I said, the rest is history. We opened Chaguanas in 2014 and opened South in 2016. And now this year we've opened Suriname in September, and hopefully next year we'll do Guyana, and hopefully Jamaica after that. Because we are the franchise owner for not only Trinidad, but Guyana, Suriname, and Jamaica.
All right, we'll go into that just now, but when you all had that experience and you're like, oh, that's a good idea, let's contact the owners of Chuck E. Cheese's. At that time, both of y'all had come out to your fields already?
No.
You were still working?
Yeah. So I just took vacation. She took vacation from her job. We went up to meet them in Dallas. Mm-hmm. We awarded the franchise right there and then. And then we started to develop it. And that was about maybe in August or September. And then I left BG by the January because I couldn't do both. Mm-hmm. It was, Chuck E. Cheese went from this to in terms of work.
And the process of getting a franchise, how does that go? You have to make initial contact and they interview you to see if you're a good candidate. And then what you have to do, you have to pay.
Yeah.
And in the construction of the place itself, do they send anybody to make sure it's of a certain standard?
Yeah.
To them too? So
yeah, particularly because it's kids involved. Okay. There's lots of guidelines and qualities and rules and regulations that need to be, because we take the safety of the children very, very safely. So we met with them. So you sign something called a development agreement, which gives you the right to develop the market, and then you transfer that into a store agreement. So we signed with them whenever. And then in about 6 months, we had architectural drawings done. And then once the design was done, selected contractors locally. All my stores were built locally, obviously. But Chuck E. Cheese kept a very close eye because we were new and it was a new market and they had no experience with us too. They were very, very particular about the choice of tiles, the choice of ceiling tiles, the choice of everything, every where we put plugs, where we put everything. That relaxed a bit into the second one because then we had an experience and then we understood it. And then Suriname, it's a sub-franchise to Suriname, so I assumed the rights of they were to me, I was to Suriname. So, the truth is I designed, ran, developed Suriname, and when I needed support from them, I went back and said, okay, what do you agree? You think this will do well here? Yeah, I think. What about this? You think this, help me with, choose some games, what's the trending games? Because games are very important. So, like everything else in life, once you have the experience, you could do it. Until you have the experience, you really need help from people who know better than you.
So just give the people a little explanation on what are sub-franchises, because I didn't know before. And that's Chuck E. Cheese's first one with you, right?
Yeah.
So how did that even come about?
Yeah, so I have a franchise agreement for Trinidad. So my franchise agreement sits with me as the franchisee and CC Entertainment in the US as the franchisor.
Okay.
A market that is remote like Suriname, which will probably only take one store, a sub-franchise model works better, particularly if there's a master franchise close by to make travel and transfer of cultures and trainings much easier than if he would have to go to the US to do that, because it's just much more costly.
Yeah.
And by then we were operating for a couple of years, so Chuck E. Cheese knew the standard of our operations that were top class, and that they knew that I could transfer the skills. Yeah. So during COVID, we got access to those markets. I actively went and sought partners. I always wanted local partners. I didn't want to own and operate the store from Trinidad. I don't think it works that way. So we created this franchise agreement, which it's a two agreements, where there's a franchisor to master franchisee. So Chuck E. Cheese International to our company here in Trinidad. So we are the master franchisee. And then there's a sub-franchise agreement between the entity in Suriname and me as the master franchisee. So as the master franchisee, I assume a lot of the roles of the franchisor with their support when I need it. Okay. So it just works so much better from a cost perspective, like a training perspective. The training team that went to Suriname were all Trinidadians. There was not one international person that trained and opened the store, which is great for our people because they get international experience and they get to, have a different experience of setting up a store and opening a store as opposed to just working and running a store like they do here. So I sent over 5 of my staff members, and they stayed in Suriname for about 6 weeks in total because they didn't want them to leave because when you open a store, it's so crowded. Yeah. And of course, my people were a great resource because they know how to do everything very well. So they wanted them to stay longer. And it worked really well because the cultures are very, very simple. Surinamese and Trinidad cultures are quite similar. And then it's an hour flight, so it's easy to get. So that's kind of a sub-franchise in a nutshell. But it works. It works for remote markets. But, like we were the first in CC, so, you have a clean slate, right? Yeah. As good as a clean slate means is plenty of work because you don't really know what you're doing.
Figure it out.
So you got to figure it out, yeah. So you got to figure it out step by step. And you make lots of mistakes, but you also make business happen. So it's, you must never, or we can never go to Suriname, it's only one store. I would say nonsense. Let's find a way to make it work. And that's what we did via the sub-franchise model, which is so far, knock wood, going good.
Sounds good. So speaking about figuring it out, you and your sister, y'all wouldn't have really had any experience in starting your own business, right?
No.
Or entertainment.
How?
Or entertainment. Or video games.
Lord, so...
Talk about figuring out, right? Mm-hmm. So, as I told you, I work for multinational. I did not... So, when you work for multinational and you have a project to do, you do an investment paper. It goes to the head office for allocation of funds. If you pass all the criteria for the investment paper, you get the money allocated to you. Okay. I have never read a P&L. I didn't know what a P&L was. Before I started Chuck E. Cheese, because in my career I'd never read a P&L. Yeah. It wasn't part of my job, and I was financially dumb. So along came first opening, and there were many aspects of the job that I'd never done, and many aspects of the corporate world that I took for granted. When my when my car had a squeak, I'd bring in my keys and leave it with the travel desk. And in 2 hours, there'd be a replacement of equal value. So if you were driving, for example, a BMW, you weren't given a March to drive. As a replacement car, you were given a car of equal value. Yeah. Now, when I have to service my car or change a tire, it's me to catch. They don't have no replacement value there. So I kind of have to carpool to work or... get the husband to drop me or Mark to drop me or something. So there are many aspects of running your own company that are very difficult. For me, the whole, financial monitoring, financial management, human resource management, you are the boss. Everybody looking to you for every decision, everything to be made. Every decision you make has a potential negative or potential positive. Yeah. And I made many, many mistakes and continue to make many mistakes. So one of them was, remember when Massey, it might have been Hilo at the time, had I don't know if y'all remember the Hamageddon special with $50 Christmas ham?
Rings a bell. I think I know what you're talking about.
Right. So just before Christmas one year, Massey or Hilo, whichever one it was, decided to run this special with a picnic ham for $50. Well, they put it out on social media, if there was social media in those days. And mad crowds came to Massey to get these $50 ham. Like people climbing on top of people hurting people. And they called it Hamageddon because it was not a very clever thing to do. So I decided to ride the wave of Hamageddon and do a Hamageddon special in Chuck E. Cheese that weekend, which was an extra large pizza with ham and pineapple, tokens and drinks for a crazy low amount, maybe $100. If everything at that stage costed $250, I think I ran it for $100, like ridiculously low. But I decided that I was going to have my own Hamageddon. Extra large pizza, I said. As the biggest pizza we have, extra large pizza, we put this on the special.
Yeah.
Well, you could not control the crowds coming into Chuck E. Cheese because the special was so good. But here the problem I made. In a Chuck E. Cheese, the most popular pizza size we make is a medium. Yeah. Next, less popular is a large. Least popular is an extra large. So we bake pizzas on a screen, a perforated screen that goes in the oven. So we would have 200 medium screens, maybe 150 large screens. But we had 23 extra large screens in a store.
Nancy, when you was offering.
Yeah. Didn't think about our own.
So I ran this Hamageddon special where people were lining up before the store opened. It was a madness with people. And I foolishly put an extra large pizza in the special, which I could not produce enough for the crowds. All I created was total mayhem because nobody got their pizza. We just could not make pizzas fast enough. And if we said to them, it was like a total disaster. Talk about the worst thing. And if we said to them, well, we'll give you a large pizza instead, they don't want that. The specials say extra large. Yeah, exactly. They want extra large. But we did not have enough screens to move pizzas out of that oven fast enough to satisfy the crowd that came. Disaster. What we did killed our reputation.
How early was that in the when you opened up?
It was, I remember, the bigger disaster was in South, and South opened in 2016. So I want to say it was December 2016 that we ran this, or December 2017. One of the Christmas times. But it was a mess, total mess. And you know what the root cause was? I had a brainwave, and I did not take time to speak to the other people in the business. Because if I had talked to my GMs and said, I want to run this Hamageddon extra large, they would have told me, but we only have 23 screens, we can't do that.
Because you're not thinking.
But I didn't. I said, Hamageddon, we got to do it. It's going to be good. Extra large. Make it really cheap. Make it real special. And what the result was, without me speaking to operations, disaster. And to this day, they all remind me, yeah, you come up with a good plan. You speak to operations yet?
Funny.
But nothing like, in business, in life, nothing like the scars on your back to teach you. Nothing teaches you better than experience. Nothing. Nothing. No course you could learn. No book you could read. No self-help. Nothing teaches you better than the scars on your back. And the experiences.
That's why you just had to jump into it.
You had to just jump into it. And I'm sure you all in your life have had experiences with school, with your jobs now, that you will carry on forever. And that's what molds a human into who they are as they become older adults. You know, who I was as a 20-year-old is very different to who I am now, 49.
I think our generation too is we focus on just getting knowledge. Like if somebody wants to start a business, they're busy reading all the business books instead of actually looking to implement it.
Start the business.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know how you finish a marathon?
Start.
You take one step.
Exactly.
You know you don't finish a marathon? You don't take that first step. It's the only way to guarantee you're not going to finish is if you don't take that first step.
It's great advice. I wish I could take it. And what would you say was the biggest success that you had in Chuck E. Cheese? Like, what's the best decision you made? Best business decision?
My managers are phenomenal. When you have good leadership, everything falls into place. And they weren't who I had from day one. I had to go through a couple who weren't good enough and to find the right ones. Yeah. But my management, my leadership team now is exceptional. I could close my eyes and those ladies have that business running smoothly at the levels, the qualities that we discuss and agree on. Yeah. Understand the brand. I'm all about brand, right? You always have to be truthful to your brand. You have to be truthful to your brand. Every decision you make in business must be truthful to the brand. My brand is wholesome entertainment of kids and families. Wholesome to me means everything balanced. Edutainment, entertainment, fun, serious, family time, birthday parties, celebrations, reward performance. Everything is wholesome entertainment of children. And but to get to the good decisions about the leaders I have, it took me making pretty bad decisions before. So there's no silver bullet. You know, there's rocks along the road that you will encounter, but I swear to you, they are there to teach us. There's no success without failure. And I know, where you all are in your lives and your careers, there's an element of fear of failure. Like you really don't want to be the lamest fella in the line, right? You really don't want to, not get the job you want. You don't want to not study what the degree you want. There's always this fear of failure. And, if it's one thing you'll take from me here is failure is a gift. You gotta fail. Yeah. Because through failure is how you learn. So, you're young, fair enough. You have the world at your fingertips. You all are so lucky. The world is so small for your age group. It wasn't as close as it was for me as it is to you all. I mean, with the internet, and you all are so knowledgeable, much more than I am. You all speak so learned about everything. Mark, my son, too. You all just have this wealth of knowledge of lots of stuff that I can't even come close to knowing. And just don't be afraid to fail. Failures are good lessons. Nothing is wrong with failing. Take the step. Take the plunge. And don't be scared to fail.
Great advice.
And now that you have all these managers handling the operations of Chuck E. Cheese, what does your role now entail? Like, what is your day-to-day?
So my day-to-day is tough these days because coming out of COVID, we all have to keep a very close eye on operations from a cost perspective, right? We also have to keep a very close eye on growing the revenue. To grow the revenue is a different mindset to keeping an eye on cost. Keeping an eye on cost is like fine-tooth comb, microscope, magnifying glass. You have to be so kind of pedantic and diligent with your costs. Growing the business is a dreamer. It is the opposite of the micromanagement of cost. Growing a business is a different mindset. You have to think out the box. You have to market differently every time you market. You have to find ways to get people to come to you instead of going to your competitors. You have to grow the business if it's not only in Trinidad, which is why I went for the external markets. You have to grow the business that way. You have to use the leverage of your brand to find ways to grow the business that perhaps did not come naturally before. And that, what it takes to do that is very different to what it takes to manage costs. I think you almost need the two people in an organization. Right now, I tend to be pulled between the two because it's only me.
Yeah.
So I find myself jumping into being in the trenches and managing the costs. Like, okay, we bought cheese from this person last week. Price went up. Who else we could buy cheese from? Whereas right now, my brain should be much more unbridled and thinking business growth and development and business development and future. But because it's just me, more so following COVID, because we got financially annihilated in COVID, it's a bit frustrating because it's one brain that is required to do different functions. So that if I was to say if I could spend 100% of my time doing in Chuck E. Cheese, it would be brainstorming and just taking crazy ideas to fruition to grow the business in ways that nobody else is thinking about.
Speaking of COVID, what was your experience like being in the restaurant field?
Well, okay, let me tell you. 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. Every day, 0. Next day, 0. 500 days with 0 revenue.
Jesus Christ.
That's what we got.
Crazy to think about.
That's what we had in our business. We were the last Chuck E. Cheese in the world, not in Latin America, not in the Western Hemisphere, in the world to be reopened by about 6 months. It wasn't like 2 weeks. The rest of my colleagues around the world in the US were open and their businesses were doing well, and I was still closed. So COVID was absolutely heart-wrenching. I don't think I've ever cried as much as I cried during COVID. I do not think I ever had more dark times than I did in COVID professionally. It sucked my professional soul. It also sucked the bank account. I mean, there was no money left. While we were closed, I was making frozen pizzas to sell in the groceries purely to pay my managers so they wouldn't leave. Because, at the end of the day, these ladies can't stay working for free, right? And we can't pay them because we have no revenue. But I knew I wanted to keep them. And I knew I needed to be fair to them. And the only way to keep them was to keep, hopefully generating some income that I could pay them. I didn't pay me, but I paid them so that they actually had a revenue while the business was closed. And again, through bad cometh good. All those hours that we spent making frozen pizzas, we just became even a much closer team. So there were lots of awful negatives about COVID. Lots. Terrible time in my professional life. But it also tested me to push the business further and go after Chuck E. Cheese and say, let's do sub-franchising. I think it will work. I want those markets. I'm going to buy those markets. So I bought the markets and I went after finding a partner. If I was in operations and making money then, I don't think I would have been stimulated enough to spend time on planes and go and try and seek partners to make the business work. Yeah. But I didn't have anything else to do. And it's sink or swim, right? So what's his thing?
Fight or flight?
Fight or flight. No, the other one. Necessity is the mother of invention. Right? You don't have a choice. So as awful as COVID was, and still is depressing for me to think about, I think 2 or 3 years I'm going to look back and say COVID is the best thing that ever happened because we were able to fix the business from a cost perspective. We know exactly what we're about much more than we were before. We were able to grow the business internationally via sub-franchising. And we were also successful in building the edutainment arm of the business, which is a mixture between entertainment and education, because we have a huge STEM offering via school teachings and field trips, etc., that we've grown over the COVID period when I had time to sit down and think what was the best structure to build the edutainment business. So, what was it like? It was torture. It really was torture. But, sometimes in your darkest moments, you find out a lot more about yourself. So not only did I find out more about myself, but I also found out more about my business that probably I wasn't giving it enough time before. Found out more about my people that I probably wasn't taking time to get to know. And now, the team is so much more cohesive. It's such a tight family unit, much more than we had before COVID.
It's crazy. Could you talk a little bit more about the edutainment part, because that sounds interesting.
Yeah, so when we first opened, we knew as I said, mother of 3. My boys have always been to field trips around Trinidad. And the thing about Chuck E. Cheese is that we have a business when children are not in school, because it's a kids' business. So Monday to Friday, children are in school, and then football and dance and swimming and whatnot, and they don't have time to come to Chuck E. Cheese. Rightly so. So imagine you have these beautiful air-conditioned facilities with 550 seats, bathrooms on site, a big interactive screen with TVs, kitchen facilities on site, and a game room. It's like a magic classroom. It's a classroom with fun.
Right.
And so I knew I needed to find a way to build a business from a Monday to Friday, because it was always empty. Unless a kid had a passport appointment or a doctor's appointment or was spending the day with granny, nobody really came into Chuck E. Cheese Monday to Friday because they were all at school. And I knew we had to build a good field trip offering, because my boys had been to field trips, and most of them were kind of crappy. And so we started, we interviewed principals in schools to find out what they wanted to see in field trips. And in those early days, they said character education. So teach children how to be respectful to the environment, respectful to adults, teach them how to be good friends to each other, teach them how to work in teams. But we didn't really hit the mark with that. We had a couple of field trips, and they were okay, but they weren't slam dunk. So we knew we were on to something good, but we weren't there yet. So we started working, this is now maybe 2015, just when STEM was starting to become something stronger. STEM meaning science, technology, engineering, and math, right? And my boys haven't been through the local education system and the rigors of the SEA curriculum. I always felt that the poor teachers, not through any fault of their own, never got time to teach the children the STEM concepts, because the curriculum was so demanding that they had to cover the content for SEA. Yes. They never got to kind of sit back and learn Lego or learn robotics, or because they just didn't have the time. Yeah. The curriculum was just too demanding, and they had to pass the exam to go to the school they wanted to. That's the problem with the SEA, right? And so I started to talk to a provider on STEM content, and he did a great job of giving us STEM content. But to teach STEM, you need equipment. You need really good equipment.
Interactive.
Very interactive. And equipment has to be modern, it has to be up to date, and it has to be relevant and interesting to the children, or else they get bored. Yeah. And he had great equipment, but I always felt like his equipment only went up to a certain age. Like he had particular building blocks, like levers and cogs and whatnot, and that was really good for little kids. But I couldn't teach a 10-year-old to build. The content was not satisfying the brains of a 10-year-old. So I kept looking for another provider, and I found this girl. Her name is Sarah Bernard. She is an ex-Atlantic engineer, so of course I love it, because she's an oil and gas engineer, which, I love the industry. And she decided to leave the corporate world and start STEM content educational club, because she believed in STEM and she wanted to teach as many children as possible the STEM concepts as an engineer herself. So I started working with Sarah. And what I found with Sarah was that she had a wealth of content for all different age groups. So she had the building blocks for the little ones. And then for the middle-aged kind of 6-7-year-olds, she had something called stop motion animation, where she has little bears or little figures, and you use iPads, and you take pictures, and you move the bears, and you take pictures, and you move the bears, and you take pictures, so you make a movie. Yeah. And she also had kits that would build a self-driving car and a catapult for the older ones. And then she had content for robotics and coding for the even older ones. So I started working with Sarah and her team very closely for the past, I guess, about 4 or 5 years. And the STEM field trips just took off. And we life, you always have to be good. You do good and good comes back to you, right? So Project Care that you've worked on, the first Project Care, one of the first ones, was working in a school up in Cocorit. We redid a whole primary school, Cocorit Government Primary, in Cocorit. And the principal of the school is an amazing man called Coglan Griffith. Give his life to education in Trinidad. Incredible human being. And we redid his whole school. So, of course, he was eternally grateful. The Project Care, Jerome knows what Project Care is because he's worked on them with us. We spent $1 million and $1.5 million in a school and work on a school for 4 days and completely redo it.
Yeah.
Blow mine. Fabulous projects.
Best thing ever.
Best thing ever.
It's crazy.
And anyway, so we finished working on this school in Cocorit. And I'm talking to Coglan and I'm getting his advice. I said, Mr. Griffith, how do I, as Chuck E. Cheese now, forget about Project Care for a little while, as Chuck E. Cheese, what advice would you give me to help me, get into the primary school system? How do I put my content? How do I add market? How do I educate the schools that this is what we're doing? I had to work with the Ministry of Education. Who do I speak to the Ministry of Education to explain to them what we do to get this moving, etc.? And he said, but Joanna, I'm the head of NAPSPA. So I'm like, well, what's NAPSPA? NAPSPA is the National Association of Primary School Principals of Trinidad and Tobago. And he's the head of NAPSPA. So he said, we have a conference next week. Come to the conference and teach and show all the principals what you do. And G freaking T. Talk about door open. And it's through my working with Project Care in Cocorit School that I was able to even know there was an association of primary school principals in Trinidad and that they had national conferences and that I actually knew the head. And, we started presenting at these conferences and one principal would take us up and then that principal would tell another principal how good it was. Or one class would come from a school and say the child is in primary 2.
Yeah. Go and tell everybody else.
He has have a brother in primary 4. So he comes home and tells his brother, boy, imagine we get to go to Chuck E. Cheese today. They teach us, we build a car, they feed us pizza, and then we get to play and we win a prize. Mm-hmm. So we call these field trips learn and play because they teach children learn and they play. And so that child will go home and tell his older brother how good the field trip was. And then the older brother will go to school and tell the teacher, Miss, we need to go to Chuck E. Cheese for a field trip. Yeah. And so word of mouth, so when I tell you all how you perform today is how you perform tomorrow. Word of mouth of doing a good job. And one teacher would tell another teacher. Sometimes we get a class coming for a field trip. The next week we get 3 classes from that school. Because that teacher's gone back in his staff room and said, y'all, that field trip is the best. Yeah. It's real, real good. You need to take it class. And that's how we built that STEM field trip offering, which I don't mean to be biased. We own a company, I understand, but I'm telling you as a mother, the field trip is the bomb, the best field trip.
It's a great idea.
It's a great idea. And the children get to learn STEM. And what we have found, what the teachers are telling me they find, is that a lot of the non-performers in the local system, because the local system is for some and not for others, right? Let's all accept that. Okay. A lot of the non-performers in the local system come to Chuck E. Cheese, and this is teaching by hand and experience. And they're learning, and they're putting up their hand, and they're participating, because we have prizes all during the learn segment where the cleanest table will get a prize. The best teamwork will get a prize. The character ed rewards we give. And what the teachers are telling me is they're getting these non-performers in school, like troublemakers in school, but they come to Chuck E. Cheese and they are just zoned into this learning because it is how they need to learn. But the local system does not allow some people to learn in the way that they need to learn, like my literature teacher in SAGS. The local system, Mrs. Moore, is not the local system. And sometimes the local system is not the right one for some kids to learn. And the teachers are finding that the children are just, then they follow up with an assignment for school. Write a report on your visit to Chuck E. Cheese. So they make it a school activity. Yeah. So the English teacher now benefits because the subject matter is a visit to Chuck E. Cheese. And of course the children write because they've had a great time. Exactly. You know what better place to learn than in Chuck E. Cheese with Chuck E. Cheese? Does it get better than that? and they get to play. So, again, it's CEC International does not do this. They don't do field trips in the U.S. This is something that Chuck E. Cheese Trinidad has started and is growing, that they are now learning from.
Oh, so they know about it.
Oh yeah, they love it.
I could imagine.
Because we get classes during the term, during the week.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they don't. But in U.S. schools, I'm sure they do a lot more STEM in like that level.
They do.
Schools.
They do.
Kind of. But I mean, that's still visionary, you know. That's pretty good.
Well, you see, it's, like I tell Mark, if there's a gap in something that you are feeling, you are not the only one. So, I know as a mother of 3, so many field trips, like they'd go to these factories and field trips, but they can't touch anything. Yeah. And they can't do this and they can't do that. Whereas in Chuck E. Cheese, one of our field trips, the little ones come and they'll make pizzas. So we give them the pizza dough with the sauce on it, and they put the cheese and they put the toppings, and then we take them to the kitchen and they see how it comes out of the oven, and then they're allowed to, try and cut it and so. So it's very hands-on, and I saw a gap as a mother of 3 boys, I saw a gap in the quality of field trips available out there, and I look at a Chuck E. Cheese like the one in Chaguanas, which the showroom area in front of the big screen can seat 250 children. So you can seat a whole school there if you wanted to teach them. And I look at that facility and I say, this is magic. Let's create the content that works. But I can't create STEM content. That's not my expertise. And lo and behold, I find the right person. And it works. And it's great. Our field trips rock. And I'm so glad to be putting STEM in front of kids.
Thinking of offering other things?
In field trips? No, not yet. Why? You have any good ideas?
I was just thinking. And I think that's amazing. Like you found that you're not getting anybody during the week. Let me think about something, and then you're satisfying this need with the field trips. And
Like
it's
the
like
perfect solution for that.
And the children are learning and playing. Yes, it's such a wonderful day at school. According to the teachers who come, I could tell them the same thing, and they don't listen. But they come to Chuck E. Cheese and they listen. It's like when I went from my 3rd year in Scotland from Canada for university. It was such a nice break from Canada, like new way of thinking, new way of teaching, new professors, etc. A day in Chuck E. Cheese from school, it's like a nice little break from school, but you're still teaching them. They're still learning. And the concepts they're learning are going to help them in SEA math. Because once you get the same concepts in your brain, then the understanding is there.
Yeah.
Such a good idea.
But it doesn't, like everything, it doesn't grow overnight. We've been working on this since 2014. It's now 2022, 8 years. Well, we forget the last 2 years. We lost 2 years. But 6 years to build this program, to get in front of the right people, to speak to them about it. But you have to get the content right to show them what the delivery is. To convince the principal to say, right, this is a nice field trip, we need to try this.
So how does the business side of that work? Like the school is paying you for
The
that?
parents pay.
The parents.
They all contribute.
Yeah. So they pay a flat amount per child. So the teacher collects the money,
Oh, yeah.
and then that's how it works. So they come to us by about 9, and they leave us by about 1. So they get back to school by the time before pickup time.
Finish, yeah.
So is it that like they learn from 9 to like 12, and then 12 to 1 is playtime?
No, they get there at 9. It takes a little while to organize them. It takes about half an hour to organize them in their tables and whatnot. We teach them for about an hour and a half, an hour to an hour and a half, depending on the age. And then they eat lunch, which is another half an hour. And then they play for about an hour.
Sound like a real fun dog.
I wish I had that when I was in primary.
Yeah, no, it's lovely. It's really lovely. Children love it. The teachers love it.
I'd enjoy that now.
Yeah,
Come on the next one.
I would love to witness that actually.
Anytime you're ready, I'll call you on when we have the next one.
Yeah.
And once you could come down, come down. It's so amazing to see the children learning and participating.
So nice to see them so happy and engaged.
Wow. And you see, as I say, you see the weakest ones jumping out. That's the most rewarding thing, to watch a teacher stand up and we had a school from Belmont come once, and this little fella who she says is a troublemaker, he only stand up, miss me, miss ask me. And I'm watching this teacher, and she stand up there, and she's going. So I walk up to her, and I say, what happened? You don't like what's going on? You have a problem? You want me to fix it? She says, I have never seen that child so interested to learn. And she started to cry. She said, I have to discipline him so much. I have to put him out of class. He's so disruptive in class. She said, I just cannot believe the difference in this child here learning like this. And that's why we do what we do. Because for that one day, that kid learned well.
That just shows how polarizing our education system is.
It is.
If you're not good at math or English, you're not going to a good school.
Or if the mode of learning doesn't suit you.
Exactly.
Yeah,
You know, like I don't particularly like final exams. I'm much happier with coursework. So the English system traditionally tends to be final exams. I wouldn't like to be educated. I wouldn't like to go to university in England because it's very heavily final exam based, whereas North America tends to be more coursework, which I personally prefer.
Yeah, and then some people learn by just reading, some people learn by seeing,
Yeah.
some people learn by action.
Yeah. Some people learn by cramming. Some people learn by constant reinforcement. It's just different ways of learning. It's funny, yeah? It's funny how different everybody's mode of learning. Some people study with music on. I could never study with music on. I just not concentrate.
Yeah.
Whereas some people can't concentrate without it.
And then our education system only tests one method of learning. So if you're not in that,
Yeah.
it's just...
How does a creative person do well in SEA? There's no test of creativity in SEA. It's math, English, and social studies content, and science content. But if you are a mad little scientist, but then what else is there to test who goes to what school? That's the problem. I don't think SEA is the problem. The problem is that there are just not enough very good quality secondary schools. Because if my boys, I only ever wanted to go to Fatima. My husband went to Fatima, my brother went to Fatima, you all went to Fatima. I always wanted my boys to go to Fatima. So for me, SEA was a non-negotiable. You had to study hard because you had to go to Fatima. Yep. If I had a choice of 6 secondary schools that I wanted him to go to, then I would have put less stress on them on SEA. Because I know, all right, if they're going one again, the other. But I only wanted my boys to go to Fatima. And they only wanted to go to Fatima, in fairness. I didn't force them there. So that to me is the more problem of the education system and less about the SEA.
It's too competitive.
It's too stressful. For a 12-year-old, God, they should be playing.
It's early.
But I also feel at that age you can't conceptualize how important going to a good school is. Like you don't really know.
No.
I feel like you don't know the gravity of it. Like you're not studying, well, I'm going to meet all these people and have my friends for so long. You're not thinking, you're just thinking, oh yeah, good school, bad school.
Yeah. No, all you're thinking is, I just don't want to pass my first choice because I don't want to be embarrassed if I don't get my first choice.
Exactly. You don't want to disappoint your parents.
You don't want to disappoint your parents. All my friends going to that school. I really want to be with all my friends.
That's all I was thinking.
That's all you're thinking at that age. And rightly so, you're 12 or 11. You don't understand you can't think of what future is at 11 and 12, thank God.
So it's so much worse than they actually think, and it's already bad on them with what they think it is. So I find it's terrible. But what are the options?
Yeah, it is what it is, right? I just think least stress we as parents put on the children is better for them to do better in the exam. But, we say that, but we don't really, that's not really our actions because we want the child to go to that school.
My parents didn't trust me at all. They didn't say a word.
No.
They looked so calm. They walked me to the exam, calm, didn't say anything. Nobody was on my back to study. They were just like, you do it, you normally do good, so go ahead and do it again. I'm glad for that, though, because I'd have crumbled under pressure for sure.
Yeah, there's so much anxiety in children at that age. It's crazy. The children that have mental health issues from this damn SE exam. It's mental health in kids, particularly after COVID, it's nuts.
Yeah.
Bro.
It's nuts. It's very, very frightening.
And you also, think about because I know that in Fatima, when COVID happened and they had to switch to online and they did it, they did it pretty quickly, but there's so much schools where there was no alternative to in-person learning. People didn't have access to like laptops, internet. So like for that 2 years or year and a half,
Lost.
so much people did absolutely nothing. And that's so
One
bad.
of my manager's daughters who goes to school in a school in South, I don't even know what it is. I don't even know the name of the South. For 2 years, she picked up a pack from school on a Monday and dropped it back on a Friday. The child didn't even have an interaction with the teacher. That child either self-taught that content or the parent taught that content to that child from a Monday to Friday every week. Could you imagine that? 2 years. What did that child learn? And she was a she still is, a very high-performing student. But we lost 2 years of kids' education. We've lost so many kids have fallen out of the system because of COVID. Imagine you went to school at 14, COVID hit. You didn't go back to school again because 16-year-olds dropped out. You know, it's crazy.
If that happens, like if you're in like Form 3 when that happened, Form 3 and 4 is so important because you wouldn't be able to prepare for CSEC as you need sufficiently. Or even if you're in Form 6.
It's so sad. It's the students through, yes, I had a rough time in COVID, I get it. But it's the students. You're all in university. Like, university is the best years of your life. How crappy is it to learn from your bedroom for 2 years? Like, so crappy. And what did you really learn? Learning online. I can't learn online. I can't look at a screen for that. And right now, I can't even read a document online. I still have to print it out. I'm a dinosaur. But, all of y'all from secondary school down, it's just, or even university down, COVID just disrupted your lives in such a fundamental way. This is why the UN always said, put children first, get children back in school as soon as possible because they are going to be the collateral damage. And they were right. Absolutely right. I mean, there were some countries that the children barely had a break in school. And those are the ones that are sailing more.
I mean, and it's also, it really shows privilege because, like, for example, for me in UWI, while I was there, when I had to do school online, it really wasn't much of a burden on me because I would just wake up like 2 minutes before the class, roll out my bed, go on the desk and start class. But there were people in my class who had to like share laptops, who didn't have their own bedroom. So like for exams, they'd have to do exams in like a noisy house.
Yeah.
And a lot of people didn't do good just because of that.
No,
so
for sure.
It really wasn't fair at all.
For sure. I agree. The ones I felt sorry for the most were the school teachers. So you're a school teacher. So you are at home as a mother. Yeah. So you're at home as a school teacher on your computer trying to teach your class. And your 3 children, or 4 children, whatever, are also on maybe a device at home because all families could not own 5 devices, right? So your other 3 children are maybe on a device, but you are teaching, you can't see about them. So you have your children say, Mommy, another on the internet isn't good. Mommy, I can't do this. But you trying to teach your own class.
Just so stressful.
So stressful. Terrible. Anyway.
This is done now, kind of.
Yeah, man.
But let's go back to Project Care. How did you get involved into that?
Oh, Project Care was the best thing. One of the best things ever happened to me. So after I left the corporate world, I went through a little depression rut where I lost my, I would call it professional identity. Like I didn't think I was worth anything anymore. And all the 400 people who looked up to me as a mentor weren't there. My phone never rang. Nobody asked me their opinion. Mm-hmm. Nobody wanted me to come and help them with anything. Like nobody. It was like a vacuum. Mm-hmm. And I did not prepare myself for that. I did not expect that to come. I knew I wanted to leave and I knew I wanted to change, but that was an aspect that I did not put much value onto. And it hit me like a rock. So it was a couple months after, and I was at home, and my good friend Mark Rosberg calls me and said, "You busy?" I'm like, "No, I have a project for you." "Yeah, you want me to come and meet now?" "Yeah, well, what later in the week?" I'm like, "Okay, I'll be there." And that was the first one I did with them, which was the, what's it called? Cyril Ross School for HIV positive children up in like Trin City. Mm-hmm. And there's 27 HIV positive children living there, either been rejected by their families, but also some still have families that come and visit them, but they just can't have the HIV positive child living with them. So the HIV positive child lives in the Cyril Ross home, and the parents and the siblings come every week or every couple of days to visit, right? So they're both kind of kids there. So Mark called me and said, I have this project I'm working on. I could really deal with your help. So I said, well, yeah, sounds fabulous. What do you want me to do? Well, we're going to strip down this place and build it back up in 4 days. I'm like, what are you talking about? You're talking nonsense. Yeah. This is what we're doing. I'm like, you all are nuts. We cannot do that. Now, this place housed 27, as I say, HIV kids. There was a big dormitory for boys in one side of the house, a big dormitory for girls upstairs, then a TV room and a big kitchen and living and dining room where they ate, and then a little like doctor's office where they got administered their medication, because they all live on medication with HIV. And the place was a mess, and all the sheets didn't match, and the beds were all broken down, and typical, right? Not enough chairs for children to eat at dinner time, etc. And what Project Care does literally is we gut a place and redo it completely in literally 4 days. If there's any big engineering stuff to do before, we do it before. We do it a couple of weekends before. But the majority of the work is done over 4 days. So it's like like those things on HGTV where they come in and they take everything out and redo everything and put nice flowers and pictures everywhere and completely redo it. And we did Project Care in Cyril Ross over May, and it really took 4 days. There were maybe about 30 of us on site for the 4 days. Contractors, so roofer and men. We replaced the roof because there was a whole family of pigeons living in the roof that we had to get rid of. So we had to get a Terminator to get rid of the roof, the pigeons, then rebuild the roof. We replaced all the furniture in all the rooms. We repainted. We got new kitchen equipment. Just like gut and redo. Yeah. And I felt such self-pride and self-worth doing this, because the 5 of us, or the 4 of us at the time, were able to transform the life for these 27 positive HIV, HIV positive kids. And through that experience and working with Mark and Ryan and Leslie, I regained my self-worth. As crazy as that sounds, that project was heaven sent to get me out of my depression. And to this day, I'm very, very grateful to it. It was amazing. The energy, the love, the community. We took the kids out because we were doing such major road work, and the kids live there. We had to take them out every day and take them to different places. So we took them to the zoo one day. We took them to the botanical gardens one day. They went to Chuck E. Cheese one day, of course, and they went somewhere else. So all of that had to be coordinated. So we got there in the morning, started construction, but we couldn't do major construction with children there, so we had to clear them out. So that whole coordination had to take place and finish all the major work before they came back in the afternoon. And there was this one little boy. He was 8 at the time. Mark was, this is 2013. Mark is 23 now, so it's 9 years ago. Mark was 14, I guess, at the time, maybe 13. My Mark. So he said, Mommy, I want to come and work. And I don't know what, I like the sound of this, because, of course, I'm now all energized at home, right? Yeah. In those days, Marky was like, as he is, very socially conscious, very environmentally conscious, balance of humans, which is his personality. I want to build a fish tank for these kids. So I said, no problem. His grandpa made the stand, because my dad does incredible woodworking. I bought everything, the fish tank, the fish, the whatever. And in those days, Mark was into that. So he set up the whole fish. He came one day and he set up the whole fish tank. And there was this 8-year-old HIV positive little boy who was too badly behaved to go on the trips with them. He was a real troublemaker. And they said they couldn't take him to the zoo or the botanical gardens because he liked run away and stuff. So it was too much of a risk. So they left him, they kept him in the house. So Marky came in, maybe second day, and he decided the place to put his fish tank. And this little fella arrived, was talking to Mark. And, as a mother, I was so poorly educated on HIV positive that I did not like the physical association between Mark and this little boy at the time, which was completely wrong. There's nothing wrong with HIV positive people. Nothing can pass, nothing can spread, etc. But I was so stupid and unknowledgeable and naive and dumb about these things that I said to my husband, I'm not sure Mark should be here because there's a HIV positive little boy here. And I don't know if Mark should be talking to him. And, with my ideals, which were so flipping wrong. Mm-hmm. And he befriended this little boy. And I watched these two children interact. And of course, I start to cry because I see my child have no reservations whatsoever about this HIV positive little boy that his mother had. Like, my son taught me a lesson in humanity that day because he just opened his arms and embraced this HIV positive little guy, which I was not prepared to do at the time. And Mark came the first day and he set up the fish tank. And of course, the little fella's there setting up the fish tank, putting the fish, whatnot. The next day, Mark, at home that night, Mom, I want to go back every day, whatever the little boy is. He told me, come back tomorrow, we're building beds. So I'm like, all right, we'll come back. So Mark continued to work with me in Project Care every day from morning to night till we finished that project, working alongside that little HIV positive boy. I can't even remember his name. I wish I remembered it. And you talk about how good Project Care is for the home. It's not as good as it is for you as a person. Mm-hmm. Because I learned so much. I was embarrassed at my naivety and my what's the word? It starts with a P. My racism. My.
I know what you're talking about.
My preconceived thoughts, prejudice.
Mm-hmm. Right.
My prejudice against HIV kids. I was so embarrassed by it and how uneducated my thoughts were, that it took my 13-year-old to teach me about humanity. And I watched that little boy, my little child, of course, just embrace what I was kind of shunning. Yeah. And I was so embarrassed after. But these are the instances in life that make us who we are. And Mark's personality continues today. He is all inclusive. He has no racial prejudice whatsoever in his brain, in his body. That does not exist in Mark. He loves all. He takes in all. He listens to all. When you speak to Mark, he's very attentive to what you're telling him. He's come and tell me, Mom, Jerome is such and such and such. He's such a smart guy. This is what he did. And that's his personality. You see it from a little boy in Cyril Ross. You see it now. He's in his 20s. His approach to life is always all-inclusive. He always has to wants and listens to everyone. And, you carry that forever. So Project Care was, what can I tell you? One of the highlights of my life. Continues to be the highlights of my life. I wish we didn't do anything last year. We didn't do anything this year so far. There is a project we are thinking of working on this year, and hopefully next year we'll be back at it for, in good, in strong. But what we did from that year, which was probably 2013, is from 20 people on site today, we now have 400 people every day. And we have companies sending, Jerome, you've seen the site. Huge. You have companies sending 200 of their staff to come and work there. And CEO to sweeper to cleaner, we treat any same. It's every human there is the same as the other. There's no separation from anybody. You can wear your company T-shirts if you want, but you're not putting no flag up saying so-and-so company supports Project Care. No. Everyone, the little boy who gives $2 in his school piggy bank towards Project Care is treated the same as the company who gives $50,000 or whatever. It's all humanity is one. And that drives such an infectious energy and spirit on that site. And then you have a human capital of 400 bodies just coming together. And we get people walking off the street. I had a lady who walked off the street in Nelson Street, the Nelson Street girls, the one we did last. And she walks into I have on a Project Care shirt. So she said, you in charge? I'm like, well, no, one of us, yeah. How can I help you? She said, I want a paintbrush. I want to paint. So I said, sure. What do you want to paint? Anything you give me to paint, I paint it. I said, no problem. So I gave her a paintbrush and yellow paint or whatever. I said, look, that room is yellow, paint on. My lady didn't sit down. She didn't stop. And she also didn't talk to anyone. She just painted. So in a couple hours, I went to her and I said, tell me something. How come you came here? She said, well, first of all, I didn't know all you was doing this. A walk past the place. I went to this school. And I saw what you all were doing. And I could not believe what you were doing. So I went on Facebook and I Googled Project Care. Not Google. I went on Facebook and I searched Project Care. And I saw what you all do. And I decided I wanted to be part of this. So I said, well, great. Thank you so much. What's your name? Her name was so-and-so. I can't remember her name. I'm like, aren't you a senior magistrate in the legal system? She says, yes. How do you know that? Yes. I said, because I read about you in the news. Like, this was a big wig who walked off the side of the street and said, give me a paintbrush, I want to paint. Because she went to Nelson Street, girls, and she loved what we did. And that is the beauty and the magic of Trinidad. And nobody taking that from us.
A project here does suck you in.
It sucks you in.
Like, for that Nelson Street one, I think I was there from like the Wednesday or Thursday because Uncle Mark had Joseph just doing all everything by himself. And he messaged me and he was like, yeah, you want to come and help? And I was like, yeah, sure. And when I got there and I saw all the things that you all had prepared for the weekend, I was like, no, this is crazy. And I was there from Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And it was such a rewarding experience. It was crazy.
Yeah, it's beautiful. So Nelson Street had this kind of damaged a bit statue of Mary in the middle of their car park. Mm-hmm. You can see it's been there for 60 years, right? Kind of a little chipped, sun bleached, whatnot. But the school the Catholic faith was all clearly very strong, and I guess they must have prayed to Mary. I don't really know. But it was like stuck in the middle of the driveway. It made no sense where it was. I was on an old, ugly concrete pillar. Like, I found Mary needed to be treated a little better. But obviously no money. She was never fixed, half broken, little arm missing hair, You know the scene. The light blue dress was like almost white. It was so old. Ryan Perkins, who is project here with all of us, has a very creative mind. But he also is a project manager, construction company, so he understands how to build too. So he has the magic of a creative mind with an engineering mind. Through no formal education, just gifted. Absolutely gifted. His wife is an incredible, understated artist in Trinidad. Her name is Kathy Perkins. She is amazing. When you come by me next time, that beautiful picture of those 3 little girls sitting in the savannah in the living room, Kathy painted that. To me, she is unbelievably talented. So one day, like the Saturday, so we start on the Thursday, and we're about to finish on the Sunday. Friday, I say to Ryan, who is not Catholic, who is not religious at all, and I'm not Catholic either, right? I'm Presbyterian, so we don't even pray to Mary. But this statue looked like it wasn't getting any respect, in my view, that she needed. So I'm like, Rai, we can't really treat Mary so, He said, well, you think I study in that? I have wall to build. I said, Ryan, oh God, I beg you, let me deal with Mary now. And this time, as I say, I'm not a Catholic, but I just find that it was clearly symbolic in the school, and I just thought it was not being treated well. So he didn't take me on that day. And then that night, I sent him a video clip of some song with Mary. And of course, he sends me back the emoji with the big eyes. So the next morning, bright and early, because we used to get there early. Mark used to make us go to the church every morning at 6 o'clock before the Catholic Cathedral, the beautiful one in town. He used to make us go to church in the morning before we started work, like 6 o'clock, and we in church already. Anyway, so we all on site early, and I'm like, Rai, Mary. He said, do not come and hot up my head with Mary now. We don't have time to do that. I said, Rai, we have to. Mary needs a home. So his wife was there. I said, Kathy, if I get them to break down Mary, because she's sitting on an ugly concrete pillar, if I get them to break down Mary, you'll take her home and paint her? Of course. So Kathy now, Ryan started to roll his eyes and get vexed with me now. So I get one of Ryan's fellas to take down Mary, heavy, like a big concrete statue, put it in the back of a van to take it to Kathy's studio for Kathy to paint. Of course, Kathy go to work. If you see this magic she created in Mary. So later that day he says, all right, pain any so-and-so. What you really want to do with Mary? I said, well, I don't really find she needs to be in the middle of a driveway. Like, I don't understand why she's there. There are not even flowers any around her. But in front of this building, this is now the where we created the principal's office. Do you remember where we created our principal's office? There were two, where there was an office on the left and then a waiting room on the right. I said, if we built like a nice little arbor for Mary here and we put some nice stones below. We don't even have to put plants because they will have to maintain the plants. We don't need plants. But let's put in like a little stone garden and a little wall and this nice arbor. And then Mary will get like a nice resting space. I don't have time to do that. We can't do that. Anyway, 2 hours later, I start to see wood coming in, being delivered, cut. I'm like, what is wood for? Aaron, and do you want a house for Mary? So the 11th hour on Saturday night and Sunday, we built this, I don't know what a grotto is, but I wouldn't call it a grotto, but we built this magnificent home for Mary right in front of the principal's office. And of course, Kathy repainted Mary beautifully, so she came alive. And then we built this wooden arbor and this little wall so the girls wouldn't go go touch me, with this little rock garden. And it's just like, it's the essence of life, right? I don't pray to Mary, fair enough, but I know she was significant in that school. And we were doing so much of this work. How could we possibly leave out the lady of the moment?
Yeah.
And the principal walked in, and of course she started to cry with Mary, and it was just lovely. Magic.
The thing that hit me in the entire project was just like, I assume that Nelson Street is like a underprivileged primary school, and it was just like the things that we got to put in, like the artificial grass and like the jungle gym, and then also like the kitchen, the home ec, home ec room, everything in it was so nice. And when you think about it, none of those kids, if y'all weren't involved, would experience such nice facilities.
No, what the one of the either the teachers or the mothers, I can't remember who it was. One of them told me after we finished the jungle gym is that these girls are from Nelson Street area, so from Sealots to Nelson Street, so that area of Port of Spain. Where they have 2 very rival gangs, Rasta and somebody. I can't remember. Definitely remember. Who?
Muslim?
Maybe. I can't remember. I definitely remember telling me Rasta. And what this lady told me is this jungle gym is on non-gang turf. Because schools are not gang turf.
Okay.
They don't, so far, they have not made gang turf reach school compounds. And what she was telling me is these girls come to school and go home, and they either stay home or they go by the shop where auntie is working, like the parlor in Sealots where auntie or granny is working. But that's their recreation. But because they are daughters or sisters of the 2 gangs, they're not allowed to be in the recreational areas of these neighborhoods because all that is gang turf. So if you are gang A and gang B runs that playground, your children can't go there. So these girls who go to Nelson Street don't have any outdoor time, no outdoor play. But when we put in that jungle gym, for the first time in their life, they could actually have outdoor play because they can't get it in their homes. Or in their neighborhoods, should I say, not their homes.
What kind of places it is y'all decide to renovate? Just schools and like hospitals?
So we've done underprivileged homes. We first started in a Kisto house, which is I didn't work in that project. I wasn't in project care in those days. And then then we did the Sarah Ross home. Then we did the Immortal Center, the top of St. Anne's. So Immortal Center takes in children who cannot survive in the local school system, like really bad learning disabilities. But they're 100% donation funded. But they have a beautiful facility at the top of St. Anne's, kind of like by opposite, what do you call it, Coconuts? What do you all call that club now?
Cascadia?
Yeah.
Oh.
What's that, whatever they call that club now? Fusion, right. Okay. So Immortal Center is pretty much opposite Fusion. So it's you, instead of going left into Fusion, you go right, and you go up on a hill, and they have like a lovely pan room where the kids play pan, and they have a yoga center where they do yoga. But they have this big hall, beautiful big hall, and it's at the top of a hill in St. Anne, so it's very cool. But what we did with Immortal, because they are 100% donation funded, they always have no money because they're always begging for money.
Imagine.
So what we did was convert their hall to a rentable space so that people from the neighborhood could rent it for weddings, they can rent it for meetings, and generate money to fund Immortal Center. So that's the kind of projects we did. And then after Immortal Center, we moved to, I don't know why we chose Digger Martin Boys Government. Mark, I think, found that one. I can't remember.
It was the principal or something.
It was the principal.
Like the principal.
Something. So we started working in Digger Martin Boys Government, and we, again, redid the whole school, repainted. Can't remember major infrastructure. Oh, we put on our football field in the back because they had no football field. I don't remember major infrastructural changes. Oh, we did an IT room. They didn't have an IT room. But when we did that school, we discovered that you can have such impact when you work in a school because it's 400 children you impact. Yeah. As opposed to Immortal had 20-something or 30-something and Cyril Ross had 27. You are able to impact more families and kids' lives in schools because of the number of children in the school. So we worked in Digger Martin Boys, and then we went up to Ascension Government, which is at the top of Maraval, like behind Ambassador Hotel.
Okay.
Yeah.
Lovely school on top of hill. Then we did Cocoreet, which was amazing too. Imagine in Cocoreet, they didn't have a hall. The hall, they had no classrooms. They didn't have enough classrooms, so the hall was separated into 3 classrooms. So imagine it's one big hall, beautiful big hall, nice terrazzo floors, windows, beautiful big hall. But it's separated into 3 by old-time blackboards, old-time blackboards on 2 posts.
Yeah.
Right, so imagine 3 blackboards this way, 3 blackboards this way, and 3 blackboards this way, having class 1, class 2, and class 3. Well, if this teacher here talking to this class, this whole class hearing that teacher.
Yeah.
And whatever happened in this class, that class hearing. So how the hell a child could learn like that was beyond me. So we put on a SEA4, SEA5 wing for them and got the children out of the hall. And for the first time in many years, the principal was able to have his whole school in an assembly, which to me in school is very important because that's what builds the family and the community of a school. And it's really so that was Cocoreet. So we tend to choose underprivileged locations. Nelson Street was a big toss-up. Some of us in the group didn't want to do Nelson Street because it's a dangerous area. Yeah. Lots of crime. It's in the middle of gang turf.
Yeah.
But we got the support from the police.
Yeah.
And the police told me, I can guarantee you will not have an incident during your time working there. Because of course, all the fellas in the police are from the neighborhood. And they know this was the right thing. And that's the thing about Project here. We got amazing support because it's amazing. And, so underprivileged schools, but we are very, very careful to choose the leadership of the institutions. Mark and I take that on personally because we feel very responsible for the money that we raise. Mm-hmm. We raise $1.5 million every year to put into these schools. And it's not our money alone. It's many people donate. Little boys donate, companies donate, they donate materials, they donate money, they donate people. And we say it's going to be useless if we do this work and hand it over to a school and then somebody doesn't use it, mashes it up, dirties it, because we are not being responsible to our donors. We can't do it without them. So Mark and I, take a good long process to vet the leadership of the institutions. And we will only put Project Care into schools where we believe in the leadership to carry on what we've done.
So you're doing like sitting down an interview with like the principal, the teachers and things?
Yeah, for sure. And then we randomly arrive at school and just see what's going on. Mm-hmm. But now because of Project Care, all the schools, can you all do my school next? My school needs a science wing. Can you come and do a science wing? And, I always have to tell them, yes, put forward your proposal to us, but I promise you're going to be evaluated. And we are going to choose the strongest leadership who is going to respect the dollars of donations that people give us, because that's our responsibility to our donors, and we have to be fair and honest to them.
It's a smart way to do it. You don't want to go and do that by some bogus principal who's just going to...
And there's no shortage of needy schools in Trinidad, right? No shortage. I mean, the way our children learn, I really wonder how some of them learn. In some of these schools I see, it's mind-boggling. But at the same time, we're not going to spend money which is going to be abused.
All right, Joanna, I want to say thank you again for taking the time to sit down with us and do this podcast. I hope you all enjoy it. Right? We're calling it quits there.
Let me hear what you all learned.
Just have to take action.
Yeah, take action.
Don't be scared of failure.
That's part of it.
Jump in the deep end, learn to swim. Don't be scared and have some patience.
Correct.